Hi, welcome back. Today, on this episode of How Are We 222 Live, we are joined by Aden Fareh. Not sure if I'm pronouncing his last name right. I should have asked him, but we'll hope for the best. Aden is a high-energy character and value-driven entrepreneur and chemical engineer with high standards, experience and technical knowledge in industry and academia. Above all else, he's driven by an internal flame which propels him to stretch and grow and make a difference in the lives of others, to leave a legacy behind that outlasts him. Yes, I have taken up a new strategy of borrowing my guests' LinkedIn introductions about themselves to introduce them here. All of that sounds very bougie, and I actually met Aden at a networking event at the beginning of the year, and I don't know what I was doing, but he randomly popped back into my head. I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to interview this man. Because not only does he have a really intriguing, unique, and interesting story, from the few times I've met him, observing the way he shows up in the world, he is definitely someone that I wanted to learn more about and his mindset. And I'm very glad to say we got to do that today. What he has come through is just like, it's just one of those stories where it's like, is this real? It's so inspiring. You will hear all about his story from him. Just a quick preface, he was born and lived in Somalia, and then for unforeseen reasons, he had to move to New Zealand, and then now he is in Brisbane. I just want to say that he is doing all these amazing things, really book smart. He's a chemical engineer. Like, I don't even know what that means. It's really amazing how grounded and kind he is amidst all that. I'm pretty sure service is definitely is a big part of his life. You can see that he actually is like walking his talk, and he practices this giving and being of service in his everyday life in little ways, not just the big moves he's making, but also just the little things he does day to day, actually embodying that idea. From what I can see, he's the kind of person that treats everyone equally, no matter where they come from, where they're at in life, what they're doing. How he treats those around him and strangers is also really inspiring. For example, we were in a lift. This random man in a suit entered as well. And Aden looks at him and says something along the lines of, "That suit is banging. Like, it suits you. Amazing. Good choice." Something like, well, he didn't say it in those words, but that vibe. And it was just such a genuine, random compliment to a stranger. And the guy that he said it to didn't even really react. Aden wasn't even fazed by that either. He put himself out there to hype this man up, and the guy didn't really acknowledge it that much. And the smile didn't even leave Aden's face. That moment really stood out to me and really inspired me. Just to not fear putting yourself out there, and it's sort of a representation of giving without expectations. I've met him briefly in person 3 times now, and every time someone is coming up to him, talking to someone, like, he just always has a smile on his face and is always open and willing to connect and actually show up for the people around him in his day-to-day. And it's really beautiful. So anyways, I'm excited for you to hear this conversation, and it was really cool to actually dig into Aden's mind a little bit today. All right, here we go.
Humble beginning.
And you're here at the beginning of the journey, so I'm very grateful that you've made the time to see me. I do really appreciate that.
My pleasure.
This podcast is, I don't know if you've heard any of the episodes, but it's more like a conversation. So podcast is about talking to people from all different walks of life.
Yeah.
It's talking to people and just basically getting in how they are choosing to live, into their mind, into their journey and story, and how they have come to process and be in this world, and how they continue each day.
Yeah.
And just basically getting into your mind and your unique perspective on life, so the listeners can get a more holistic view of the world.
Right.
So we, the listeners, can make more informed decisions and figure out how we can do the best in this life that we can.
Yeah. Okay. No, I hear you, and I think effectively the question is asking what's my life's philosophy in a way, and I think the question I'd like to ask is, and I hope everyone asks themselves, is that if there were more people like me, would the world be a better place, right? And so what I think that does is not only push you to be a good person, but I think it also pushes you to be a good person both in public and in private. Right? So I think that's what I would say, like an authentic conduct, as opposed to actually showing off and just saying, well, in the light, I'm going to come across as this, amazing person, but actually in dark, I'm going to behave completely differently. Of course, that everybody needs a rope. Right? Nobody is obviously perfect, but I think if we have the mindset to say, if we constantly asking ourselves, if there were more of me, would the world be a better place? I think it is a good guiding principle, right? Because suddenly it's not, I think, about you. It's really about more on the ecosystem that we live in, right? And the people that are around us, and I think it is, I think it was Gandhi that said, be the change that you want to see in the world, right? So, and I think it was Jim Rohn that said, affirmation without action is the beginning of delusion, right? So, you can make a certain proclamation, but you actually got to follow through, right? With conduct, right? With the proper conduct, as opposed to just, making the proclamation itself, right? Because that's what hypocrisy is, right? Claiming to be one way or do certain things, okay, or to hold the belief about it, but your actions to be actually in congruent with the spaces of, I say, cognitive dissonance in itself. Yeah, so that's the way I sort of try to strive for. There are many times where I've certainly failed miserably. But recently I've read a book. It's the same author of The Who, not How, but it's actually called Again and Again. And sometimes, yes, we can strive for something, but sometimes we can also be harsh on ourselves, particularly low moments, right? And then it's those low moments that we think about and say, oh, okay, well, I'm not doing so and so. Am I a hypocrite? Am I actually following through? It's what I said. Am I actually practicing what I'm preaching? Right? And so I think that a lot of that comes from actually not focusing so much on the progress that we've made, right? But it's actually the ideal gap, where we currently are to where we want to be, which is, it's not something that you actually ever reach. It's something that you try to asymptotically reach, right? And so I think some self-love and some self-grace is warranted in that case. Yes, you want to strive for the best you want it to be, but there will be many opportunities and cases where you will fail and fall short, right? So it is not, so that you're not an imposter, right? And I think, because sometimes you can say, who am I to do this? Or you can also flip it. And I think this is, for me, when I look at life, I think there's two deadly enemies, and that's entitlement, and the second is victimology. So entitlement says, I should have this, I should have this, I should have that, right? But I don't believe there is such thing. I think the mentality should be, I've earned this, therefore I'll have this, right? So that's, I think, entitlement. And the second thing is victimology. Victimology is to basically says, why is this happening to me? My question to that, my response to that would be, why not you? What makes you special that you should be exempted from life's problems and life's challenges? And in fact, who do you nominate? Is it your neighbor? Is it your geography teacher? Is it your classmate? Is it your mother? I mean, what if they have deserved to experience the challenges, What makes them more deserving to experience the same challenges that you are experiencing? And I suppose if you do in fact have the proper foresight about the challenges that you are facing, of course at the moment, at that point in time when you're going through, it's difficult, it sucks, it's hard, right? And so you probably cannot have that long-term thinking. But if you can just pause, right, and not sabotage yourself and make a decision, because there's two dangerous places to make a decision, right? Well, and that's when you're emotionally high or when you're happy, and we've seen people, when they get drunk, they do reckless stuff. But similarly, when you're emotionally low is when they make terrible decisions, right? So both of them are dangerous places to be. So when you're, going through a challenge, you're obviously in emotionally low time, right? Position. And so at that point in time, if you can just persevere and not making reckless decisions, right, I think you will look back at your adversities later on and then recognize that there were actually opportunities all along. But you can't obviously have that perspective when you're going through the challenge. So can you just persevere just long enough to actually develop that foresight? Yeah, so that's, I suppose, an aspect of my philosophy of life. I think another one is I suppose another thing that I really believe is charity, and charity without expectations, right? So charity can come in many forms. It can come in terms of your money, it can come in terms of your knowledge, it can come in terms of effort, in terms of your encouragement, in terms of your attitude, in terms of your example, right? So I think that, and I think that's deeply rooted in, having an abundance mentality as opposed to a scarcity mentality, whereby you think that if you give, you're going to miss out, if you're going to lose. But I certainly believe that in the concepts of charity and giving without expectations, and just being, I'll give you an example. The other day I called a certain government agency, and I asked the lady how's her day been, and she said that my goodness, this is the first, I've spoken to hundreds of people today, or tens of people today, but this is actually the first time that anyone has asked me today how my day went, right? So sometimes we can be so tunnel vision that we actually even forget to give a bit of charity of our time and kindness. And there have been definitely many times where I failed to do that myself as well. I can tell you that for many times, for a long period of time, I was underfurnished in the patients department. So I remember one of my mentors telling me that you need to be kinder to people, right? So if you're sitting here or listening to this podcast and you think, well, I don't have those traits, that's just not me. Yeah, that's not you today, but that could be you tomorrow. So it's no negation, or you're not relegated from belonging to the league. I think that's where, in fact, when it comes to achievement and ambition in general, we sometimes look at our current reality, and we judge our future reality based on where current reality lies, right? And I think that's a deep mistake, fortunately. And that is, could be your relationships, could be your mindset, could be your health, could be your financial situation, right? So if you're willing to change, I believe that you have a dream and drive, regardless of what area of your life it is, that you will achieve that. You might not get to the ideal self that you desire, but sometimes it's the journey that counts as opposed to the destination itself.
When you're saying that you yourself struggled with patience, how you got to cultivate, like what you're saying, someone's like, oh, I don't have those traits.
Yes.
But it's a practice, like you can choose to. How did you get from no patience to patience?
Okay. So I think life will humble you itself.
It does.
Right. So I think as you obviously grow up as an adult, you will be exposed to life, and then life will expose you. And life will definitely expose your weak points and your shortcomings, and so it's in the process of that, but also in the process of you making a conscientious decision to change and grow, right, and overcome whatever shortcomings that you have, which was the patience for me in this particular case. Then you're going to end up in a better place. You're going to improve as a person. I suppose if there's other arena, is also self-education. If you actually read the literature, that's going to afford you to be to develop as a person and cultivate those traits that you desire. Another area of development for me came from, I think, better associations, having a mentor, people, I think it's been said that surrounding yourself with people who will tell you only what you wanted to hear, as opposed to what you needed to hear, is a cancer to your potential. So just ask yourself, the people that I'm surrounding myself with, are they actually holding me accountable? Or are they actually, are they actually facilitators of my growth? Or are they actually enabler? Are they actually just enabling my behavior? Right? Because I hope that everyone develops the courage to, to find and to surround themselves with someone who will not tolerate their crap.
Yeah, because it's about like those hard. Something that's been coming up a lot recently for me is like it really is a lot of our growth is from communication and hard conversations. But it's like, how do you get to a point where you're willing to accept those hard conversations, or maybe you're in a situation like a relationship, especially a family, like a lot of the time one side isn't ready to have those difficult conversations, and then it's like, how do you go about those hard conversations when sometimes some people can see them as an attack rather than
Okay, so I think it's a multifaceted answer. First one, I think, is it really comes down to, first of all, who are you receiving the advice or perhaps the guidance from, and are they genuine? Okay, or are they actually saying those things to put you down? Okay, so that's one aspect. So let's suppose that in fact that person is genuine, right? Then the next thing that's required from you is a sense of maturity, right? To recognize that you got flaws, and that if you want to improve, that you're going to have to confront those flaws, right? So take inventory of yourself and identify what those weaknesses are. And a lot of times that requires bridling your own ego, right? Controlling your own ego, and not taking it as a self-attack. And I think the third component would be to work on your self-image. People who, it's certainly something that I've struggled for a long period of time, because I used to have a low self-image. So any feedback I'd interpret that as more of a personal attack. So, but you have to again recognize what's more important in here. Do I really want to satisfy my own ego? Because what's ego? It's the armor that you pull, that you build around your little heart, in order to protect it from hurting, right? So I think it was Jim Rohn that said, don't major in minor things that take away major things. So what's major here? Is it your growth, your change, your development, your progression, right? Or is it protecting your feelings? So I think sometimes you do need to zoom out and say, what's more important here? Is it, do I protect my feelings, or do I protect my legacy? So I think it's been more of a, which all, I suppose, goes back to the maturity, having that sense of conscientious thought process.
You mentioned legacy on your LinkedIn, I believe, or somewhere I saw that you, that's something that sort of drives you, like leaving a legacy bigger than you, that outlasts you.
Yes.
And I'm just curious, your hope for that legacy.
Yeah.
What are you trying to build?
So for me, I ultimately, one of my values is what I call a righteous anger, which basically means that if you see something being wrong, if you see particularly someone being wrong, then you ought to stand up for that, right? So ultimately, one of my great strives for life is to empower the weak. Maybe it's someone that has been bullied. Maybe it's someone that has been marginalized because the way they look, or maybe because of their sex, or maybe because of their country of origin, or maybe because of their particular strength. And so if I can empower, if I can, I suppose, summarize what my ultimate legacy would be, it's not to necessarily live a material world, but a mindset world, an empowerment world, where people can really just stand up for themselves. Okay, I love empowering young people, right, and making sure and making them understand that they are just as beautiful, sophisticated, valuable, unique as anybody else, and that they're not inferior to anyone, nor superior to anyone else at the same time. So I really want to instill people in the mentality that you walk, hold your head high in confidence and lower your wings in humility. That's ultimately what I want to do, in terms of legacy. It's the mindset for people to possess as opposed to materialistic possessions. There's nothing wrong with that. You can have a nice car, a nice boat, a nice plane. Those are awesome, but I hope your identity is not attached to that, because if we're going to measure our self-worth based on what we have, then anybody who's got more possessions than you is suddenly better than you. So I think that's the way I see it. That's my legacy. Self-empowering people.
Beautiful legacy.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, I really like what you're saying about how, with the material things, we are, this 3D human experience where we are sort of in a material world, and it is okay to enjoy these things and be a part of it and appreciate the beauty of life and these tangible things, but realizing that we are more than that as well at the same time. I think that's a great way to look at it, because I think it goes one end to the other. You're full into the materialist life, or you're shunning everything external, and it's a nice perspective to be in the middle and embracing both. So yeah, that's a good.
Absolutely. I mean, people will say, for example, you shouldn't have material stuff, or you're materialistic, right? Or you just like houses, you like chasing cars and stuff like that. Well, think about it, right? So if you had $1 million and that $1 million, you have two choices. One is you put it in the bank, right? First is if you actually use it to build a new house. Which one would be more beneficial? Well, think about it. So in the first option, who is the beneficiary? Well, it's you and the bank, right, ultimately. But in the second example, well, okay, so the builder, the person who's putting the tile in is going to benefit. The structural engineer is going to benefit. The council person is going to benefit. The curtain person is going to benefit. The plumber is going to benefit. The electrician is going to benefit. The lawnmower person is going to benefit, right? The lighting person is going to benefit. The roofing person is going to benefit. The carpenter is going to benefit. The furniture suppliers are going to benefit, and therefore their families are also going to benefit. So I think in that sense, success would naturally breed success. So it's not about being anti-success, but it's just about not attaching your self-worth to those things, right? I think just going back a little bit to the example of the house. Have you ever shot a gun yourself?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
Have you?
Yes, I have many times. And so whenever you're shooting a gun, you have to consider two things. So one is the target itself, right? But then you also have to consider what's behind the target, right? You don't shoot a gun in a crowded theater, do you? Right?
No.
Right. And the reason is because what's behind the target, right? And so whenever I think you're making a decision, you always say, well, what's going to be the repercussions? So if I keep it in the bank, I benefit, and then what's behind the target is the bank, right? So the bank benefits. But if I use it to build a house, then there's hundreds of different elements and entities that are going to benefit. So in that case, it feels more sensible, I think, to invest than to just hold the money in your bank.
It's a good analogy. It's good visual to actually get in, grasp what you're saying. Really enjoy that.
I appreciate it.
You were talking about the victim mindset And then, what was the other one? The two...
There's the victim and entitlement.
And entitlement, victim entitlement. And I am curious if you'd be open to sharing your story from where you came from in Somalia and how you're here now, because I just think that the position you were in, you could have easily fallen into that victim mindset, but instead you transmuted it into doing something. So
Right, awesome. So a little bit about my background, just a bit of a summary. I was born in Somalia. I grew up in the jungle, in a nomadic lifestyle. We used to chase sheep, goats, and camels. I used to walk long distances. I didn't have much of a possessions. We had effectively one bed sheet, which was your pillow, your blanket, and your mattress. As part of that, we used to run around the countryside in search of water, food, and pasture for your animals, right? And we lived from the sustenance. Our sustenance was basically from our animals. And so I was living in that lifestyle, and then I finally had my lucky break. And whilst I was sleeping one night, I got attacked by a hyena. I managed to survive that attack. And at the time, which I suppose talks to what I was talking about a little bit earlier, is when you're going through adversity, it's difficult. It's difficult to have a positive mental attitude. But I think it's important at the same time not to sabotage yourself as well. So at the time, as a nomad, the greatest set of assets are your pair of legs, because that's what takes you to distance. So having faced that particular incident in my life, I felt that could have been the worst thing that could have happened to me, or I definitely could have interpreted that. But it turned out to be my greatest blessing, because it was the catalyst for me to leave that lifestyle and go into the West, right? So were it not for that, I wouldn't be effectively here today, right? So did I necessarily have the foresight, and after I had that attack next morning, said, yes, this is my ticket out of here? Absolutely not. My thought processes that we're going through at the time was, holy hell, how am I going to travel? How am I going to survive? How am I going to be left behind? How am I going to be crippled? How am I going to be sitting, in some alley, right? So, but I think then coming here, I actually met a Syrian gentleman the other day, not far from here, just outside. And he was telling me how back in 2014, when there was a civil conflict in his country, that he had experienced some traumatic events similar to mine, but I think his attitude was different. I mean, all he could do was just complain about how people should feel sorry for him, and what he went through, and all of those things. And I thought that's, for lack of a better word, pathetic in a way. I think if you've gone through all of that, and if you are here today, and you've been given so much opportunity, and you've got all your faculties, and you've got all your physical stature, only now to come here and complain about how you've suffered, and actually not do something about it, I think that's a disservice to the people that helped him along the way here. And so that is the lens that I saw through my own journey, that instead of, like, whenever a challenge happens to you, you've got one or two choices, right? So you can spring back, right? Or you can assume the fetal position. The fetal position says, "For me, why is this happening to me?" Or for me, like, how many things have happened to me, right? Those, to me, they are privileges. I think they make your story a lot more memorable. I think it makes your story a lot more relatable, and I think it makes your story a lot more impactful, and hopefully it gives you a lot more resilience, right? And it gives you more purpose, it gives you a lot more clarity, right? And it gives you, I think, a lot more self-belief, because if you can come from that and be here, whatever your journey may be, right, then it really gives you that propulsion to move forward to that next step. So, and if you want to, the quickest way to destroy your life, or you feel sorry for yourself and see what happens. You're just gonna dig your own grave, right? And I think you might walk around alive, right? But in many ways, you've already dead. You've already died when you made the decision, I think, to feel sorry for yourself, right? This is, this could be a bit of a controversial issue, right? And people say, well, how can you say that? Or how can you experience these challenges and all of these things? It is not a belittlement of, my own challenges or his challenges or anyone's challenges. Okay, but I think it's about having the proper perspective about it. Alright? Fundamentally, that had happened. Yes, that's your past. But the question is, where do we go from here? Right? Where do we go from here? Do we use that as a motivation, as a reason, as a propulsion, right? Or do we use that as a stones, to hold us back? Do we use that as a pebble in our shoe, right? Or do we actually use that as a Nike shoe? Just do it.
Yeah, that's my query about this whole thing is what do you think, like you guys went through a similar situation.
Yeah.
Like, why are some people able to do what you're doing and choose to see the positive side, and some choose to use it as a step back or a barrier rather?
Yeah, very interesting question. And in many ways, I think it comes down to self-dignity. And do you want things easy, or do you want to earn things, right? Which goes to the second disease that I mentioned earlier, which is the entitlement mentality, right? If you want things easy, well, actually, you can use your experiences as a mechanism for people to feel sorry for you, and therefore they give you unfair advantages. So that's one way. I think I'm only conjecturing here that I think that could be a reason why some people choose to take that path and say, okay, I'm going to feel sorry for myself, and therefore, so it's actually a bit of a strategic thinking, right? Say, okay, right, what's my shortcut? I want to use my story to my advantage in order to gain unfair advantages, right? Another mentality is, okay, wow, I went through all of those. I'm so grateful to be alive. Now I need to actually give back. I need to, I'm here because so many people have helped me along the way. So I didn't come here only to be average. And so therefore I'm going to actually put an additional effort on top of what the average person is willing to do, in honor and a homage to those who helped me along the way. So I think it comes down to a matter of a personal dignity.
Yeah, they just think that's the only way, like the best way for them to get through life. That's what would you say to the person who's in that victim mindset? Because I was talking to a previous podcast guest, like everyone's just doing the best they can with what they know. It's because of all their inputs of life that they're choosing that route because they think it's the best way. But my thing is like with your perspective, like it's a better way to go through life when you choose your route of going. Yeah. So how do you help someone in that place? Like how do you show someone in that place that it is better, not just like it's better for the world and them, it would better their lives, they would feel better within themselves if they chose a more optimistic mindset?
Okay, so have you ever heard of the phrase, don't send your ducks to eagle school?
No.
So some people fundamentally do not want to change, right? And they've made that decision, and so if you are trying to change that person who've already made the decision that that's the way they want to be, then you're just exhausting your energy. Right? So that's number one. Number two, I would say to a lot of people, they've chosen the victim route, because that's the way that, you know, it's exactly like the previous gentleman has said. It's what they've been taught. It's an impulse that they've experienced. But I hope those people have the courage to explore, right, and be curious enough, okay, at the other side of the coin as well. So, what if I actually flip the coin? You know, what would that look like for me? And fundamentally, I think that the question I would ask them is, would you rather be given to you? Would it rather be given to you, or would you rather earn it? Right? And, you know, what do you have to lose if you have to go, just have a go at it, right? And I think perhaps a lot of times, a lot of people, it's just the easy route. But I think if you really want to grow, then obstacle is the way, right? Obstacle is the way. There's a wonderful book called Obstacle is the Way. And perhaps if you're in that situation, have a read of that book, because I think it will give you a really different perspective. And ultimately, don't you want to be more? Don't you want to be more impactful? Don't you want to touch more lives? Don't you want to be, I mean, what do you want to be famous for? Right? It's not about you. Once you're gone, it's gone, you're gone, right? But what's going to endure is really the example that you leave behind. So isn't it a shame that you came through and went through all of those challenges, and it's gone with you to the grave, whereas you could have left so much more impact and touched so many lives and helped so many people if you had the courage to actually go through the obstacles the way. Yeah.
With the whole "don't send your ducks to evil" still thing, that's not this. That's a hard one for me, because I know that, I mean, maybe it could just be because I'm like growing up through development stages, but I know I definitely, in my teenage years,
Yes.
I definitely had a victim mindset. And I guess that's why I'm curious about this, what makes people decide to go one way, because when I look back, I could see my life going in a very different trajectory if I had stayed in that victim mindset. And I guess what I'm trying to, what was the thing that made me just, I don't know. I guess that's what you saying before, why do you have this sort of mindset? And do you know why you have the mindset you do? You go out seeking growth, but why do you choose to do that?
Yeah, because I'm in competition with myself. And so if I'm not outperforming the person I was yesterday, I don't feel like I'm winning, right? And I don't, and if I don't win, I'm not better, okay? But it just means, I think, having fun in anything you do, right? And I think fun lies in growth. And, you talked about, for example, yourself, you went through a particular phase of your life where you didn't always embody the same mindset that you have today. So as human beings, we go through different phases. The first phase is child, right? And the next phase is a boy or a girl, right? And then the next phase is what we call the cowboy phase. So this is the party phase. And then the next phase is what's called the warrior phase. This is where you're grinding and growing. And then the next phase is you're going through is a family person, right? The next phase you go through is a king or a queen. Next phase is you go through is a sage, right? And some people have, for example, like yourself, in those earlier stages, it's very normal to have a different mindset, right? From one stage to different stage. So that's normal. But the people that I was more implying, I suppose, or talking about, are people who have chosen to stay in one particular stage and don't progress through. Because what would require from to go from one stage to the next stage is discomfort. Surprise, surprise, right? And so those people have just, I think, chosen deliberately that I'd rather be in my comfort zone than actually push through. Yeah, so, but a lot of that also comes down to your associations. You take a cold object and you put it into a hot room, what's it going to happen? it's going to heat up to equilibrate with the hot room, right? Similarly, if you take a cold hot object and you put it into a cold room, it has no choice but to equilibrate with the room and cool off, right? So it's this association, I think, is so important, because they will shape the person that you tend to be. The other thing are your reading and your listening, right? Those two have also very massive impact on where you go and your trajectory in life. But I think I wonder, right? Does the person, have the courage? Like, there's some people, right? Some people, they say, "Oh, I really want to do so and so, but I just don't have the confidence," right? But that's actually the wrong way to think about it, because confidence is something. It's not something that you are born with, but it's something that you develop, something that you earn. So there's a wonderful book called The Four C's by Dan Sullivan, and he talks about in that book, it's first thing is commitment. You make the commitment, then you put forth the courage, and you courage done repetitively develops the competence, and the competence leads to the confidence. So it's not about the confidence, it's just saying, can I muster enough courage, okay, to actually move to that next step, next phase in my life? Or do I want it to just stay in my comfort zone?
When you're in that discomfort stage, when you're moving to the next stage and you're in that zone of discomfort, sometimes I found that it can sort of feel like, I don't know about you, does it ever feel like you're regressing in any sense? Or maybe not regressing is the wrong word, but because you're in that discomfort, you're not sure, like, yeah, how do you know that you're on the right track to be going into that? Like, the discomfort is from growth and not because you're going the wrong way. Because when you're like you feel out of alignment or you're going the wrong path,
yes.
It's also uncomfortable, but it's how do you decipher between, how do you know you're staying on the right track?
Right. I think it's the level of always the type of pain that you are experiencing. I think that's a great indicator. If you are regressing, it's more, the pain tends to be more of regret, tends to be more guilt. But otherwise, growth tends to feel a little bit more anxiety maybe. It can feel a little bit more, you feel stressed out. Sometimes it feels like a physical exhaustion. I think that's a great differentiator, right? And also it's just literally by observing yourself, well, what exactly am I doing? These things that I'm doing, are they actually destructive? Or are they actually constructive in terms of moving forward? So your emotions, the emotions that you feel are great cues to figure out whether you're progressing or regressing.
You said observing yourself and what you're doing.
Yeah.
Does mindfulness or spirituality or faith of any sort have any role in your life?
100%.
Yeah.
It's the top of it. Yeah, without a doubt. So for me, is faith is in top of my list, and I think what faith helps me is use it as an anchor, right? So we say let God be, let go and let God be, right? So I think that's where spiritual. It's been so helpful in so many different ways, okay. But that's just a clear example of where you're using always that as a rope to pull you forward.
So what is what is your faith in? Is it in a particular?
Yes, Muslim.
Okay.
Yes, so I am Muslim, and the religion is Islam. I was born into that faith. I continue to practice that faith, and it has been, and I think it's. People say often, what are you grateful for the most? And I found my faith, and that's what it means to me. But I've had the privilege of, interacting and participating with other faiths. I've been given the opportunity to give talks in churches, to speak and collaborate with, faith leaders. So it is no. I think imagine if you had one color to paint versus if you had a multitude of colors to paint, right? So I think interactions, that's the way I interpret it. Differences in people, right? Whether it's gender or face or country, right? And the more differences we have, the more colors we can create, and therefore the prettier the picture.
Mm.
Yeah.
I'm a bit ignorant to religions, but is the Quran? Is that the?
Yes, that's the primary book.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry, this is just so crazy that's what because I didn't know that about you. But yesterday, look.
Oh, okay.
I did not know that about you. I was in the city the other day, and there was someone giving out free Qurans, and I was talking to the guy, and today I was like, I always bring a book for the train. When I'm on the train, I'm like, oh, I want to start reading this. So that's just so one of those like universal things that I thought that was just crazy to bring up. That's so insane, but
yeah, absolutely. So what you will find is that the Quran is written in it's Arabic Fusha, authentic Arabic language. So the English translation can be a little bit challenging to follow because it's written in such an advanced language, and therefore they try to translate it as absolutely as close as possible. So for a beginner, I would probably recommend getting a more of a translated type, okay, or one I suppose with a proper explanations or deeper explanations as opposed to the basic translation in itself, because that what that do for you is provide the context. You might read and think, well, I don't understand that statement, but if there's an explanation or a context, right, then your understanding will make a lot more sense.
So when you said that your faith is what you're most grateful for,
yes.
What about it? Like, did you grow up religious?
Yes.
So, and okay.
Yes.
So it's just sort of, it's always been that anchor for you, like you're saying, like the rope, it's just something.
Yes, absolutely. I think it keeps you humble. Sometimes if you think, and this is no indictment of anyone who possess a particular faith, but I think it can be a little bit dangerous when you feel like you're the most superior being here. Right? So that in itself is humbling. I think Ilya talked about life will humble you. You will be exposed to life, and then life will expose you and keep you humble and grounded. I think if you do have faith in higher powers as well, just that that's going to will always keep you grounded, I think.
That kind of makes me think of something you were talking about in, I think it was the video, I'm not sure, but you were saying how in New Zealand, all the movies were like filmed in high rises, and how that kind of like sparked a dream in you, like you want to be a part of like in the city and in the high rises working and things. And now you're here doing that, and I'm just wondering what is that experience like? Like that was your dream, and now you're living it. What is that experience like for you?
Okay, so yes, so that was watching. This is when I was back in New Zealand, early on learning English and that sort of thing. Seeing movies in New York being filmed in high towers, right? And living there. So for me, I stood up in 12 Creek Street, level 26, facing the river, and looked down, and I saw my dream was fulfilled. Because that's one of the dreams that I've always had. So I think when you are in pursuit of your dreams, you think that as soon as I go to the top, I'm going to experience this elation, this bliss, okay? But it really doesn't feel that way. You feel fulfilled, you feel grateful, but I think that it's been said that a winner is always grateful for where he is or she is, but a winner is always dissatisfied with where he is. Right? So it's that staircase effect. So that actually achieving that dream in itself taught me something valuable. That it was actually never about the dream itself, but it's about actually the process to get there. And earlier on we talked about the idea of progression and regression. And as soon as if you don't have your next task or goal set, you are going to progress. So one of the ways to minimize your chances of progressing in life is to have unaccomplishable goals. Right? So your list of goals should be so ridiculous that it's impossible to achieve in a lifetime. Right? Because then it just constantly makes you reach out for that higher goal. Right? Then people say, are you constantly in chase? And isn't that a miserable way to live? No. I think you just find your happy place in obviously being grateful and being present. Because there is necessarily, the past is past, the future is the future, but the moment that you live in is obviously the present, so being grateful for the present, okay? But I think having a sail, no ship or boat can ever arrive at its destination, right? Without having a direction to sail for, right? So the purpose of setting a goal or having a dream is not necessarily to achieve the dream itself, but to really set your sail. You might, it's almost like, the horizon. The dream's almost always like a horizon, but it's about, I think we say, A.M. Nightingale that said, success is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. Right? Success is not the immediate fulfillment of a goal or a dream. Right? So I think it gives you a purpose and meaning in life. One of the things that I think we often, at the moment, struggling with in life is idea of mental health, and there are many factors which create and cause that. But one of the, I think, factors is lack of clarity. Right? When your boat has no rudder, you're just spinning, right? You got no place to aim, okay? Because I think the purpose of a human being is not meant to sit. A human being is not like, it's sort of like a human being was not meant to be like a ship in a harbour. So what happens if you just leave your ship in a harbour? It's going to rust away, it's going to decay away. The purpose of a ship is to sort the seas, right? So I think, and with all the challenges, and with all traditions, and with all difficulties, right, it's nevertheless, that's what a ship is designed to do. Okay. Similarly, as human beings, I don't think we're designed to do just sit. I think we're designed to pursue something, and in that pursuit, you will come across immeasurable challenges, and it's that overcoming of those immeasurable challenges, right, that you will start to develop the colours and the growth. So the number of challenges do not get any shorter or any less, okay? But it's think about yourself as a glass of water, right? And so you fill your cup at the beginning of the day, and then these little pebbles, they start to attack you. And some of those pebbles are strong enough to actually penetrate your arm, and so you start to leak out water, okay? I suppose bottle of water would be a better example than a glass of water in this channel, right? But you get the idea. But then as you start to grow and overcome more, what do? The pebbles do not change, but you change. You grow. Suddenly your outer shell is thicker, and so therefore what would annoy you or perhaps put you down emotionally 12 months ago, you can now endure. You can just rub it off your shoulders. The pebbles haven't changed, you changed. Sir Edmund Hillary, before he was able to finally summit Mount Everest, he tried many times, and he failed many times. But he said, you are a mountain, right? And I'm a human person. And I will outgrow you, and I will conquer you. Right? And that's exactly what it's done. So life's challenges do not change, but you change. And I think that perhaps is a perspective which people who have experienced challenges, stuff like that, okay, perhaps one way to look at it is to say, well, okay, so I've experienced these challenges. Now, actually, I've got a better armor, which means now my capacity to handle challenges are actually much better than what I was previously. Which means now actually bigger doors have now opened for you. And so now if you actually hold back, you're actually doing a disservice to yourself. Because you're not taking advantage. You've already suffered the pain. You've already paid the price. Now it's time for you to collect the prizes. So why would you miss the prizes if you already paid the price? I get passionate about it.
Yeah, no, it's great.
Yeah.
Yes, like the universe only gives you what you're ready for. Like you wouldn't be.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the universe will throw, some, curveballs that you haven't thought of. But I think that one of the ways to get a handle that is to have an expectation that challenges will come about, which again is having a sense of maturity. Suddenly, if you say, why is this happening to me? Oh my goodness, the world is falling apart. Well, what do you think? This is not, paradise, where everything is preordained, sorted, and there are no challenges. Okay, life is a test. So I think when things therefore do go wrong, you don't panic. You say, oh, it's just part of the deal. It is part of the package. It is part of the plan. All I need to do now is just rise to the occasion. Okay? It's not, your pain is neither permanent nor personal. There is no some grand plan to punish you alone. And whatever challenge that you're going through or have gone through, just remember there's 10 other people that have gone through something 10 times bigger. And sometimes we undertake a task. We talk about idea of attention. So what's tension? Tension, there's expectation minus reality. And sometimes we say, okay, I'm going to undertake this task. It's going to be so easy, no problems, no challenges. Okay. And then with reality, we embark on that journey. And the reality is completely different. Anytime, just ask yourself, right? Ask yourself in any challenge that you want to undertake or a journey, and you say, okay, give it a number between 1 to 100 in terms of its difficulty. So let's suppose you say it's 80. That's the level of difficulty that I'm going to expect it. In most cases, it's probably 800. So what we tend to do is we underestimate the effort that it's going to take. And so therefore that creates a tension because we have such a low expectation of the challenges, so that when we actually face the reality, we suddenly feel like the world is falling apart. Okay, this is bad, this is not what I expected. That's because your expectation was always misguided. Yeah.
So what you're saying is we all go through hard times, obviously.
Yeah.
But how we respond to those challenging times.
Yes.
And whether it be like drugs, alcohol, or you use food to numb out, or you use social media, whatever your vice is.
Yes.
Like, so what you're saying is it's about rather than after you're already at that point.
Yes.
Managing before that, so when you are at that point, you don't need to turn.
Yeah, absolutely. That's spot on, right? So, when things are going wrong, it is a lot more difficult to be able to have that problem mindset, that positive mental attitude, the courage to continue. Okay, when things are going wrong. But if you come initially, it's been said that failing to prepare is preparing to fail, right? And so if you came already with your armor strapped in, then you know what? When the difficulties arise, then you can now handle them. But if you're going to say with the expectation, oh, it's going to be fine, it's going to be plain sailing, and then challenges hit, what are you going to do? That's the moment you crumble. Yeah. So I think it's not being pessimistic, but it's about being realistic. You know, it's about being realistic about what it would take to achieve a certain task.
Yeah, what I'm thinking when you say realistic, I think sometimes that's hard for me to hold in my mind, because what even is realistic? What we see in the world is our perception, and like we all create and make our own. We're projecting onto the world, like what we see is what we are, what we're choosing to see.
Yeah.
So for me, that was a thing for me. I'm like, well, what is realistic? Like literally anything is possible if you truly want it, or how you see things. Yeah, I guess I always saw it as like what you're saying, pessimistic, like to be realistic.
Yeah.
Because anything is possible.
Yes.
So why not choose to hope for the best? But it's not.
I think it's not just hope itself; it's preparation. Right? Yeah, I think that's. You might think that, okay, so the level of preparation that I need, okay, is X, Y, Z. Okay, what I'm saying is pretty much 10x there. Okay, 10x there. Okay, so it really gives you peace of mind. It really does. You know, when you're going through it, and when it happens, okay, it really gives you, which gives you the courage and to continue. Okay, because well, I actually expected this to be hard. Okay, versus oh my god, oh no, you know, I didn't expect it. I thought this was going to be easy. Who told you so? Right. So whether it's overcoming addiction, whether it's going to winning audition and acting, whether it's starting a business and sticking with it, whether it's relationships. Right, so we always you see we often embark on making decisions based on motivation. Right, we're excited, we're emotionally high. Let's go! I got this. Okay, and then right, you go to the gym. Okay, motivated. Okay, but now you got to actually lift the weights. Okay. Oh, that sounds heavy. Okay. So if you had the expectation that it was going to be heavy, those weights are going to be heavy, and there's going to be a price to be paid, then you know when you show up, no surprises. That's the word I was looking for. Okay. The whole what derails people is surprises. Yeah.
So on that, like even no matter how much you do manage your expectations. There is always going to be something, like you can't prepare for everything.
100%.
So how, maybe, I don't know, think of a recent surprise you've had in life. When those things inevitably do come up for you, how do you manage that once it's already happening and it's in motion, and not default to, I don't know, negative behaviours or self-sabotaging behaviours? How do you stay aligned with your true vision?
Okay, so a classic example is that I've got the project that I'm delivering for the Air Force. We get a surprise every week. Okay, but what helps is that we've developed enough evidence to overcome the surprises. So by you staying true on the course, you build enough evidences, you develop enough deposits on your confidence bank account to be able to withdraw it when you actually need it. So every challenge that you overcome represents a deposit in your bank account. But if you never overcome anything, if you never push yourself, if you've never made that initial deposit, which is the hardest, right? Even in business, they talk about is the first $100,000 is the most difficult because you have no evidence, you haven't developed, you haven't done anything, right? So the more you have, the more follow-throughs you've done, okay, then the greater the evidence that you will have for yourself. So surprises will come. That's inevitable. Nobody is absolved from life's problems, life's challenges, life's surprises. Okay, but build enough evidence to say this too shall pass.
That what you're saying, like the first one is the hardest one. How does someone go about getting their first win of confidence and proof?
Yeah, I think we all have I think it's recognizing your self-worth again. It is recognizing that you've got innate capabilities and desires, and more importantly, that you are flexible, right, and malleable to develop, okay, the necessary armamentarium to achieve those things and to overcome those challenges. Okay, so it really comes down to self-belief. Work on your self-belief. Okay, so have faith in your capabilities, and then and the purpose, right, of having belief, okay, is just to have it serves as your temporary fuel, because once you have evidence, you no longer rely on belief. You now rely on facts, right? So if you're trying to get your first win, just work on your self-belief. Yeah, work on your self-belief. And one of the best ways to do that is to keep, I suppose, the promises to yourself. And work on your words, having positive affirmations, okay? It is, I think, an important part of that. Having self-compassion is an essential aspect of that. But ultimately, remember, as Jim Brown said, affirmation without action is the beginning of delusion. So you can hype up all you want yourself, you can have so many affirmations about yourself, but if you're not actually willing to put action behind it, forget it.
Well, I want to be respectful of your time because you've been so gracious and gifted me your time today. But I just really want to ask you something because I feel like you're the perfect person to ask this. Something that's... So obviously, you grew up in a place that's very different to the city, to Brisbane, to where we are now. And I'm wondering, does Brisbane, or where we are, like where you're living now, does it feel like home? What I was talking about with my friend the other day was like growing up in a certain place.
Yes.
And then you move, but like, because that's your first memories in that place.
Yes.
So I wonder if you ever feel fully comfortable somewhere else. So yeah, how do you feel?
That's a great question. I think it depends on the individual. Some people fully wanted to integrate and embrace what they have. Some people, and that requires courage, and that requires going outside of your comfort zone and really acclimating into a new environment. Some people, they just don't want to go outside of their comfort zone. They just want to have their initial emotional attachment to where they come from, right? I think I belong very much for me to the category that always want to move myself forward. Okay. Yes, there will be some stuff that I always will miss home. Okay, but my home doesn't define me. Okay, because if you're attached to a particular place, you're not a free person. Right? You're not a free person. Or if you're attached to a particular materialistic thing, or even a particular person, then you're not a free person. I think so. Do I miss home? Yes. But home doesn't define me, I define my home, right? And I think that gives me the liberty to choose where I call home. And do I feel Brisbane home? Yes, absolutely. If I find a better place to live than Brisbane, okay, then I'll move there, and that will be my new home. That is where I'll always appreciate Brisbane, I'll always appreciate home, okay? But I feel like Brisbane is serving a particular phase of my life, a particular version of myself as a person. But sometimes, if we're going to outgrow the particular version of the individual we are, I suppose the particular person we are at that point in time, that requires us to change, okay, and go to another place. So, for example, when I was a nomad, that life was serving that particular person I was at the time. Brisbane is serving today a particular aspect of a person that I am. Sydney and Mo will do a different aspect of me, right? So again, it's serving the mission. is keeping the main thing the main thing. If I attach myself to home, a particular place, a particular person, a particular possession, okay, well, I'm not keeping the main thing the main thing. I'm majoring minor things over major things.
And what do you think about, because a big thing at the moment, like with the whole AI and tech innovations that are going on in the world,
Yes.
just the crazy state of the world in general right now.
Absolutely.
Because you have experienced that more like but like necessity
Yes.
is a way of living,
Yes.
and connected to nature
Yes.
way of living.
Mm.
Do you think, and I guess from what you're saying, like different service, different points, but do you think that there is, because a lot of people that talk about this, they haven't experienced that way of life.
Yes.
And I'm wondering, maybe not, what is better is the wrong question, because like you're saying, different purpose, different, but do you think that it is a way like humans should be living, like more connected to nature and our natural state rather than what's happening now?
Yes. I think it was LBJ, the former US president, that said community with neighbors and community with nature. You know, and I think that life really epitomized that. You know, we were very much tribally orientated. We used to, at night there was no television or anything like that, right? So after a long day, when you're coming to work, we used to socialize, we used to lit a fire, and we used to sit around the fire and we used to tell the stories. So we used to make a proper human interactions, right? As opposed to being distracted by technological devices. I think what guys you call that interactions of the soul is meaningful only in the presence of the personalities. And he's very right. And the level of connection that you have, intensity of connection that you have with someone is completely different. You know, the lowest form is a text message. And then the second form is a phone call. And then the next form is a video call. And then the ultimate call is in-person presence, right? And so that is one thing we've had always, is we had that deep interconnection and deep bonds, which is deeply rooted in the human psyche. The second aspect that it really fulfilled is the idea of I think this is what really minimized, which is effectively was non-existent. The idea why mental health was non-existent is because we didn't have 10 million people that we're competing with. You open your Instagram and everybody is showing their highlights, right? So we didn't have that. So in terms of mental labor, it was considerably a better way to live than it is to live in the West. So if we had higher physical labor, because you have to walk ridiculous distances, climb mountains, okay? You have to endure a lot of physical pain when you get injured and that sort of thing. You gotta say, okay, get on with it, as opposed to be strapped in and get seconded into your hospital. So we did experience a lot more physical pain, but we've certainly experienced far less mental pain. So it has its pros and cons, but as an innate, as a basic human fundamental requirement, I think it would that life, even though it was so simple, okay, it offered, I think, a better way to live. That might sound crazy, but that's the coming from someone who actually lives. I don't talk about in abstract format. I've experienced it, so I'm just sharing what I've experienced then versus now. Got far more possessions we've ever had. Okay, and that's great, and they fulfill needs and give us options, and it is no indictment of what we have here and the blessings. Okay, but as you talked about, if you look at the hierarchy of needs, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I feel like those basic things, the connection, were fulfilled, particularly the connection and our lifestyle.
So you're saying it was a sort of mentally happier place to be when you're there?
Without a doubt. Yeah.
So do you think it's possible to bring that into, to this society, the Western world, to merge the two? Because, what you're saying, that the mental health and like the whole loneliness epidemic that's happening right now.
Yeah.
It's like where do we go from here? Because it feels like we're on this trajectory that we can't. I mean, I'm obviously not expecting you to have all the answers. This is just more like a conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So one way is actually to technology to advance so far that we actually get a medical treatment for mental health altogether. Maybe they put a chip on your mind, or you take a magic pill that switches off those particular genes which cause, for example, mental health issues. So that's one way to achieve that, right? But as far as I suppose making a call on the current reality that we live in, is it possible to bring those things in? It's possible, but to bring it entirely is improbable. Because it would require a deep cultural changes, and all habits die hard. The Somali culture, or even the Italian culture, or the Arab culture, or the Spanish culture tends to be a bit more, I think, social, whereas the English, Australian, New Zealand, Caucasian culture tends to be more individualistic. Right, it's more of an individual, right? And so, but yes, we do, around certain things like sports, okay. But I think the culture is fundamentally based on individualism and individual achievements, okay, not a collective growth necessarily. And because of that, I think there will always be an obstacle to overcome. That's going to be quite a challenge, I think. Possible? Improbable, I would say.
Yeah, because you were saying that it was happier there. But do you feel happy here now?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely. Look, it means because you have high mental labor here, right? But then there was certain things that I was not happy about back then. I didn't necessarily was happy about walking 500 kilometers, right? So there's certain level of happiness, or different type of happiness, that I've been able to develop in here that I was not able to develop back then. Similarly, there were different level of happiness that I had back there that I don't necessarily have here, because your environment will always win. Yeah, regardless of how strong you are. Earlier you talked about the idea of associating with people who are better than you, but sometimes you might say, oh, but my friends or my community or my surroundings, yes, they're not as ambitious, or they don't subscribe to the same values that I have. Because I'm strong enough, okay, it's okay, I can still hang out with them. Foolish. Doesn't happen. There's no such thing. The environment will always win. A great example is you take a rock in a river, okay, and the water will eventually win over time, right? It will eventually erode away the rock, right? So the environment will always win. Yeah.
So what I'm sort of getting from that is there's happiness to be found in like wherever you are. So
Yes.
your choice, what you're focusing on, and where you can choose to derive happiness from wherever you are. So.
Yes, oh, absolutely. I mean, earlier I talked about, somebody said, oh, you're always pursuing this and that, and maybe it's business, maybe it's, running around, and that sort of thing. So, well, that's what I find in my happiness, right? So you can choose to find happiness in anything. I mean, you can find happiness in robbing banks. That's true.
That is true.
That's why people become addicted to it, because that's where they find their happiness, right? Yeah. So, but I think also we need to be a little bit, I think, conscientious, or I suppose be aware that we're not necessarily leisure-driven people. I think it's important that we are driven. Yes, there are elements of leisure that's necessary, but I think we ultimately, purpose-driven people.
Like the aim isn't leisure. We're allowed to have leisure, but the aim isn't.
Exactly.
The end goal isn't that.
Exactly right. The aim is not to be living in leisure. Yeah. The aim is to experience leisure, to experience the life the full spectrum of life, but not to just be fixated on one particular place. Because if that's the case, then you will always chase just that. And if you think about, you know, the electromagnetic spectrum, all the way, you know, from the gamma rays into the radio waves, right? That's a massive spectrum. If you think about that as life, imagine if you just say, I'm going to just focus on X-rays. Well, you've denied yourself the opportunity to experience all those other wavelengths of life.
Well, you have covered a lot today. But I'm just wondering, before we wrap it up, is there anything in particular that's on your mind or you've been experiencing in life that you feel is something that you want to share or get off your chest or just specifically talk about?
Yeah, I'd just like to share a couple of books that I think would be helpful to people. Two great books I've recently read. One is called The Gap and the Gain, and it's done by Dan Sullivan and Benjamin Hardin, and it's just a wonderful book. And that book really teaches you how to be a practical way to develop gratitude. Yeah, I used to think gratitude was more around, repetition, affirmation. So grateful for you, so grateful, enumerating that. But it's actually what it does. This book teaches you how to quantify, right, your achievements, and therefore that in itself naturally leads to gratitude. Right. Another thing that I used to, because I would class myself as a particular personality trait, what we call an aggressive overthinker. Okay. And I think we're all guilty of that to some extent, that we overthink stuff. And sometimes our thoughts, they go crazy, and we try to say, if I could just switch off this tape in my head, right? So people say, you should control your thoughts. And I always used to think, well, how do you control your thoughts? I mean, what's the magic formula? Who's got it, I paid $5,000, all right? But who's this person? Who's got the keys, okay, to thought control? But then I read this book called Don't Believe Everything You Think. Okay, wow. So this book actually was quite a revelation for me, and it is not the thoughts that we control, but it's about actually the thinking that we can control. So the thought is an event. So there's a Stoic equation, and I think you talked about this a little bit earlier, is that if you got E plus R equals 1. So E is an event, it's happening. Maybe someone ran into you. Maybe you've been robbed. Maybe you've been insulted. So that's happening. It happens to everybody. But what you can really control is your reaction. Do you insult back? Do you punch back? Do you keep quiet? Do you move forward? So that's your response. And depending on your response, which your response is really your actions and your attitude, and therefore that's going to shape your outcome. Yeah. So that is that's important, right? So what your thought is an event, it's an excitation, right? In your mind, it's an event happens in your mind. Something comes to your mind. Okay. Oh, did I leave the house? I left the house. Did I actually close the door? That's a thought. Oh my goodness. Probably someone came in, broke into they stole all my belongings. Okay, they probably left the house on. The house is completely flooded. Oh my God, my parents are gonna kill me. I'm dead. What am I gonna do? What am I gonna do? So that there is your thinking. It's your analysis. It's the analysis of the event. So you can't control the thought, but what you can control is the analysis that you put forward. Right? So the other day, I'll give you an example. So the other day I was walking to my car. I completely forgot that the parking limit was only 2 hours. And I said, holy hell. Well, that came to me, I remember. So I started walking to my car. And I was hurrying. I saw myself like hurrying. And I stopped. So all of these things were going through my head. I said, what am I doing? Me now going to my car, it's not going to make anything different. All it was doing was just emotionally, okay, agitated me. So that was all my thinking. It wasn't actually my thought. It was actually my thinking. So the point I'm trying to say is that instead of thinking about how to control your thoughts, just try to control on your thinking.
Yeah, I've never heard it put like between thoughts and thinking. Like that's a really good way to make it make sense, because you know you are not your thoughts. You just realizing that really does change so much that you don't have to, like what you're saying, like feed into it and let it run away. Like I think that's what a lot of people like with meditation and stuff. People think there's something wrong with them because they can't meditate and these thoughts keep coming up. There's a separation between thinking and like choosing to dive into the thought. Like you can let that thought come up. Yeah. It's gonna come up, but you can let it go away, or you can So thanks for sharing. That's really cool insight. And
so it's the initial little match. When you lit the fire, but what actually keeps feeding the fire is the fuel and the oxygen. Which is your thinking. So do you empower that little thought, that little flicker of flame, or do you still extinguish it, which also is yours? So the book again is called Don't Believe Everything You Think.
I will link all your things in the show notes, but is there anything you want to like say out loud and verbally express, like where people can find you?
Probably find me please on Instagram, probably Instagram or Facebook, and adenfareh@gmail.com is also my email address. So if you need to reach out to me via email, you're more than welcome to do so. But you can always look me up on Instagram, it's Aden Fareh. Similarly, Facebook, Aden Fareh as well. And if you want to put the link in there, I appreciate it.
Oh, okay. Coming and joining me and for your time. I really appreciate getting to talk to you and all your insights. It's really amazing. I feel like there's so many things I want to ask you. They have a really interesting perspective on life, and I just thank you so much.
Well, I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to have a bit of a yarn, and I think you should be very proud of yourself. What are you doing at 19? It's just amazing. You know, I think it would be amazing. You know, where you are 10 years from now. You know, at 29, another 10 years. But I think you've started something very special, and I'm sure people appreciate what you're doing, and so I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to have a tiny bit of saying that.
Thank you so much. That really means a lot to me, saying that.
Thank you again, Aden, for your time today, and thank you to you listening for joining us, spending some time with us. You can get in contact with Aden, just check the show notes. Everything will be linked there. If you want to learn more about the podcast, I will link the website in the show notes as well. If you have any questions, feedback, recommendations, anything your heart desires, there is a contact form on the website, or you can reach out on the Instagram at howarewe222live. But the website is probably the best spot because I'm trying to avoid social media as much as I can. So I'll be quicker to respond if you go through the website. And you can sign up to our mailing list on the website as well. Anyways, I will see you in the next episode, and I hope you have a great day, night, wherever you are. Remember, you are loved. You are never alone. Peace and love. I will see you again.